Hey guys, it's Rush. BattleOfGlory.com lets you earn real-life money with their World of Tanks tournaments. If you'd like the chance to earn prizes upwards of €250 by playing World of Tanks, sign up with the referral link down in the description. For this game, I'm going to be talking about what happens when the enemy has a huge number of TDs and you have even more than that. So, World of Tanks is undergoing this meta change recently, and I think it has something to do with the huge increase of all tier 10 games. I just think many people are sick and tired of trying to play heavies and getting RD'd, and so they're resorting to something that's typically a bit easier to play, and that's going to be TDs. But the why doesn't really matter. You still have to deal with this huge influx of TDs regardless of why people are doing them. And what you're going to notice in this game, we have 7 TDs, they have 6, and both of us have 1 RD. So right off the bat, when you're in this situation and you're playing in a heavy tank or medium, you're going to have to make a couple of presuppositions. One is that if you're aggressive, you have to do it perfectly. You cannot make a mistake, because if you're aggressive and someone with 750 hits you, that's a huge deal. That's a third of your hit points. And so you have to be very, very careful in a game like this. 2 is even more compounding on the careful idea is that your team is going to be very, very passive, and so you're not going to have a lot of support if you're an aggressive player like I am. So, for example, very often on El Haluf, when I'm on a map like this, in a matchup like this, except when there aren't as many TDs, it's very, very common for me to go to K5, and I'll just play this bull right up here. And that what that allows me to do is it allows me to play hull down, and I get to fight anyone who's on the K line from the enemy team's perspective. Now, what you're going to notice is I'm not going to do that, and 2 reasons. It's the mistake thing. I don't know where the hell all their TDs are. I know typically TDs will camp at H8, F9, and H0. Those are the common TD positions. However, if I make a mistake, I don't want to find out with a 750 hit point notice. I don't want to say, oh, there's a TD at K0 I found out because a Jagdpanzer U100 hit me. So I'm just going to be careful. And secondly, it's your team is very likely to camp when they're all TDs. You'll notice I was staring at the Jagdpanzer U100 sitting at D2. And it's 100% your fault if you're aggressive and your team cannot support you. It's just something to realize. You should expect TD players not to have the situational awareness to actively move up with you. So effectively what happens is when you have a lot of TDs, the front line becomes closer to your base. Now, you're going to notice I'm aware of that, and I haven't done anything all game. And, proof in the pudding is 0 tanks have died, except for the guy who flipped himself, right in front of me. So, and we're like 2.5 minutes in. So that's how this game is going to progress. Now, some people would say, yeah, but you should be aggressive. You should be spotting for your teammates anyway, etc., etc. And I'd like to point out that that's exactly what the IS-7 at B6 is doing. And you can just watch him on the minimap and then read the chat, and you'll see exactly how well that works out for him. So what you're going to notice is the IS-7 is pushing up. I don't like to lead the charge in this type of situation, so for the reasons I suggested. I'm also not used to how good this thing's turret is, so I've played 3 games in this tank while I was playing this game, and so I didn't really want to find out how good the turret was when there were, likely to be 2 TDs sitting at H0 ready to shoot at me, or 3 even. So that's the situation. Now, the IS-7 did move up. You can see he's paid dearly for this aggressive play, but I want to support him, and I'm able to flank the Centurion Action X. Now, the reason this play works, even though I've been saying I don't want to be aggressive, etc., etc., is because there's an IS-7 in the open. Now, I could make the first poke because I wasn't lit when I did it. No one expected someone to do that. You can see the Centurion Action X was looking away, and now the IS-7 is pushing up, so any TDs way back here are going to be focused mostly on the IS-7. If I make short, quick how do I say it? If I make short, quick pokes, they're all going to be looking at the IS-7 who's in the open, and really they only have a shot on the very top of my turret, so I can take these relatively low risk. Now that the IS-7 is going to die, or he's dead, I'm going to take 1 more poke, and that was a bit risky, but you can see it was worth it for killing the Centurion Action X, and I'm full HP. So right now, if you read the chat, the IS-7 says Team Idiot. That's not the IS-7 who pushed K5 it's not this IS-7 who YOLO'd the Cent AX. It's the guy who was playing in the north. Now, he had no support. Big surprise. It works both ways. He shouldn't have been in the north. That's just my advice. Learn from him. He should not have gone to the north when there were only so many tanks who could have supported him. And probably the Jagdpanzer U100s could have moved to have supported him better. So that's the difference between a good heavy tank driver and a bad heavy tank driver, and then a good TD driver and a bad TD driver, at least in my opinion. Now, what you're going to notice is I take a hit right here. It was only from a bat shot, and he low rolled, thank God. He ends up damaging my fuel tanks. I've repaired my fuel tanks. Now, the reason I'm doing this is because A, I'm in a Chinese medium, and B, we're 5 minutes in, and only 4 tanks of the enemy team have died, 7 tanks total, and one of them flipped himself. So this is what a long game looks like, at least from my perspective, when we're 5 minutes in and only like 4 of the enemy is dead. So what I'm doing is I'm preparing for this game to end in some sort of draw-like circumstance, so I don't want to lose all my HP right at the beginning of the game effectively, and go from there. Now, one thing that you don't see a lot of heavy tank drivers do, even if they're in a mobile heavy like an IS-7, this thing, a 113, or an E5, is they generally refuse to move around the map. Now, what I noticed is that when I was sitting in K5, there were 4 TDs looking at me and probably 2 more. They just aren't lit. And so what I wasn't going to do is I was not going to go push the K line when I knew A, I had no support, and B, I was going to be fighting into TDs who were full HP. So I decided not to push that, and I'm using this vehicle's mobility, even though it's a heavy tank, to move around the map to try to give myself some sort of support so I can try to make plays. So what I'm doing is I've noticed the Jagdpanzer 100s are camping, I've got a grill at G2, and so I'm moving into an area where they can support me, because TD drivers generally are, like I said, are not good enough to move around to give their teammates support, and that's just how the game works. Now, right here, I'm going to be making a play. I've never really played here, but what you'll notice is that it's very common for TDs to be playing this ridge back here. So I make a poke, and I didn't overextend because there could be TDs on that ridge. You'll notice A, I didn't get shot, and B, as this Type 5 heavy pokes, he doesn't get shot. And I'm pretty sure, the 183 isn't really losing a lot of HP to anything with large alpha. He got hit for like 200 and then 300 from the mouse, I think, and from the bat shot. And so no one got hit for 750. I'm okay poking this, put a shot into the mouse. He's going to die. And then, I mean, the game is still relatively close, but we're sort of bringing it back. So this is very, very common. When you're in a game where they have TDs, you'll notice none of the TDs have died yet. Literally 0 TDs are dead. That's because they're all sitting in their base, refusing to fight anyone. That's just how TD drivers play. Now, what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be increasing the angle. So the way this game works is when you're trying to deal with a camping group, it's very common for that camping group to be in one small corner of the map, and that's exactly what you can see right here. What you want to do is you want to try to increase the amount of angles they have to deal with. TDs especially are designed to fight things directly in front of them. That's why they don't have a turret. That's their ideal circumstance. So what you need to do is you need to make them to traverse their hull a lot. And so that's what I'm doing by coming up north. We're going to have some teammates in the south. You can see the Jagdpanzer U100s have left base, and so hopefully they're going to be pushing the south, and that's going to create the situation where the camping TDs, who, you know, are hopefully relatively low HP by now, don't really have anything they can do. They can only back up into a corner, and that's the best situation they can possibly have. Now, obviously, that's great for us too. Now, the enemy Batchat crashes as he runs away. I'm pushing in. This is going to be relatively aggressive, all things considered, because if you look at my team, they haven't even passed onto the enemy's half of the map yet, especially the guys, how do I say it? Right here, like they haven't pushed the K line in any means whatsoever. So this push is sort of idiotic, I think, but I'm just confident in my ability. I don't really think a TD who's been staying in base all game is going to rush me, and so you can see this play I'm going to make is sort of costly for me right there. So the girl pens me for 666, the object 268 bounces me for 750, and what you're going to see is I'm just going to sort of play it hull down. I want to keep pressure here, but it's very, very common for you to lose games when you're in this situation, because look how many tanks are not in the fight. We've got 1 tank fighting an IS-7, and then 3 other tanks who aren't really engaging the same people I am, so it would be possible for me to lose this. Now, already hits me from A0. I'm aware of that. I'm going to fall back. Now, falling back is going to give my teammates time to push in. You can see the Type 5 is on his way. The 183 is sort of getting shots on like the 268 or whatever. The 268 dies, and that's going to create the situation where we have a 4 tank advantage. I have no problem just driving in and trying to get damage because, at least in my opinion, this was a relatively low damage game. So, I mean, that's how it's going to be. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to drive up. Now, I'm pointing my turret towards the E4 just in case he shoots at me. There's the grill. I'm going to put a shot into him. I luckily set him on fire. I end up doing like 1,000 damage to him or something. And the way I'm approaching this cover is I'm trying to side scrape while I'm driving. I should probably do a tutorial on that, but I was using the rock to try to hide some of my front, and what that was hopefully giving him a huge shot on my tracks and ideally baiting his shot into that. Now, obviously, all their tanks have died. The E4 ends up tracking me. We can just sort of fast forward this because he's full HP despite being in a heavy TD. Like, that thing easily substitutes as a heavy. He's full HP. We're going to be able to get to his side, put a couple shots into him, and that's going to turn this into a nearly 6k damage game, if I recall. So, meanwhile, while the team chases down Artie, I'm just going to sort of cry and, be upset that I didn't get 6k, but that's the game. So we'll take a look at the end plates and we'll talk about the strategy. Alright, so the way this game played out was kind of interesting. I want to highlight a couple things. I just did nothing for the first couple minutes of the game, and so that's, it's kind of, when I try to mentor people, I try to tell them, if you don't see an opportunity, you don't do anything. Because a lot of the times, if you don't see an opportunity, it's because there isn't one, So maybe I'm just a bad player and I couldn't see an opportunity to get more damage, but you're going to notice that that's a possibility, I guess, but I would sort of consider it unlikely based off of my stats and whatnot. So what you're going to notice is I just sort of sat in, I don't remember exactly where I sat, but in this area, and I just did nothing until I saw an opportunity on the Centurion Action X, and only then, like 4 minutes into the game, it took me to get my first 1600 damage, and that's very, very common, especially in these all tier 10 games when they've got huge amounts of TDs, many vehicles with huge amounts of alpha. And so you sort of have to play a bit opportunistically because bottom line is it's very, very common for you to just sort of play aggressively on this line or whatever and then get hit by 8 TDs. Well, not 8, but 3 TDs with 750 alpha right off the bat, and then you're, whining in chat because noob team didn't support you. And so that's sort of the gist of this game. It's like, okay, when they have a ton of TDs who are likely to be in this location, and like this area, and maybe this area, you have to be so careful because it's not one TD who's going to be in any of these locations. It's not like you're going to get penned for only 750. If you make a mistake, it's going to be at least 1,500 damage taken from you. And so that's just my experience, and that would be my advice. Now, the second thing I want to highlight is I moved around. It's like the reason mobility is such an important aspect to this game. It can never be underrepresented, except maybe in light tanks, which sacrifice everything for mobility. What you're going to notice is I moved all the way to the other side of the map, and then I went up here too. That's very, it's okay, especially when you look at the enemy team lineup and you say, okay, this game is going to take a good 10 minutes, might as well just sort of see how it goes and play safely and just play the entire game through instead of dying in the first 2 minutes and only getting 100 damage or whatever. So that would be my advice is, first, if you don't see an opportunity, don't do anything. And then if you see an opportunity on the other side of the map, it's more than okay to just drive all the way across, especially if you're in a tank that goes 50 kilometers an hour. It's like, that's fine. So that's pretty much it. This game was relatively simple, but that's sort of World of Tanks in my opinion. You just look for a couple opportunities to take advantage of. I saw one here, I took advantage of it, I fell back and then took advantage of one here, and then went up here, took advantage of the bat shot, pushed all the way to here, and then it was only endgame where I really sort of secured the damage, and that was when I made it a 5,800 damage game. Now, as far as that leads us into the end plates, I guess, what you can see is I got 115k credits, 1,581 XP. This was my second game in the WZ111, whatever the hell it is, 5A, I think. 16 shots fired, 12 out of 11 hits and pens, 65k credit profit, and that's the game. So, hope this video was helpful. If you want to see more, be sure to hit the like and the subscribe button, and I hope to see you around. Later, guys. Bye-bye.